From a king's pride to a lion's den. The chapters that we are reading today show us that it is ultimately God, not human rulers, who have the final say. So, let's jump straight into it. We have some lengthier readings again today. Starting off with Daniel chapter 4. King Nebuchadnezzar, to those of every people, nation, and language who live on the earth, on the whole earth, may your prosperity increase. I am pleased to tell you about the miracles and wonders the Most High God has done for me. How great are his miracles and how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an eternal kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at ease in my house and flourishing in my palace. I had a dream, and it frightened me while in my bed. The images and visions in my mind alarmed me. So I issued a decree to bring all the wise men of Babylon to me in order that they might make the dream's interpretation known to me. When the magicians, mediums, Chaldeans, and diviners came in, I told them the dream, but they could not make its interpretation known to me. Finally, Daniel, named Belshazzar, after the name of my God, and a spirit of the holy gods is in him, came before me. I told him the dream, Belshazzar, head of the magicians, because I know that you have the spirit of the holy gods, and that no mystery puzzles you. Explain to me the visions of my dream that I saw and its interpretation. In the visions of my mind, as I was lying in bed, I saw this. There was a tree in the middle of the earth, and it was very tall. The tree grew large and strong. Its top reached to the sky, and it was visible to the ends of the earth. Its leaves were beautiful, its fruit was abundant, and on it was food for all. Wild animals found shelter under it. The birds of the sky lived in its branches, and every creature was fed from it. As I was lying in my bed, I also saw in the visions of my mind a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven. He called out loudly, "Cut down the tree and chop off its branches. Strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the animals flee from under it, and the birds from its branches, but leave the stump with its roots in the ground, and with a band of iron and bronze around it, and the tender grass of the field. Let him be drenched with dew from the sky, and share the plants of the earth with the animals. Let his mind be changed from that of a human, and let him be given the mind of an animal, for 7 periods of time. The word is by decree of the watchers, and the decision is by command from the holy ones. That is so that the living will know that the Most High is ruler over human kingdoms. He gives them to anyone he wants and sets the lowliest of people over them. This is the dream that I, King Nebuchadnezzar, had. Now, Belteshazzar, tell me the interpretation, because none of the wise men of my kingdom can make the interpretation known to me, but you can, because you have a spirit of the holy gods. Then Daniel, whose name is Belshazzar, was stunned for a moment, and as thoughts alarmed him, the king said, "Belshazzar, don't let the dream or its interpretation alarm you." Belshazzar answered, "My lord, may the dream apply to those who hate you, and its interpretation to your enemies. The tree you saw, which grew large and strong, whose top reached to the sky and was visible to the whole earth, and whose leaves were beautiful and its fruit abundant, and on it was food for all. Under it the wild animals lived, and in its branches the birds of the sky lived. That tree is you, your majesty, for you have become great and strong. Your greatness has grown and even reaches the sky, and your dominion extends to the ends of the earth." The king saw a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven and saying, "Cut down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump with its roots in the ground, and with a band of iron and bronze around it, and the tender grass of the field. Let them be drenched with the dew from the sky, and share food with the wild animals for 7 periods of time. This interpretation, your majesty, is this. In this is the decree of the Most High that has been issued against my lord the king. You will be driven away from people to live with the wild animals. You will feed on grass like cattle, and be drenched with dew from the sky for 7 periods of time until you acknowledge that the Most High is ruler over human kingdoms, and he gives them to anyone he wants. As for the command to leave the tree stump and its roots, your kingdom will be restored to you as soon as you acknowledge that heaven rules. Therefore, may my advice seem good to you, my king. Separate yourself from your sins by doing what is right, and from your injustices by showing mercy to the needy. Perhaps there will be an extension of your prosperity. All this happened to King Nebuchadnezzar at the end of the 12 months, as he was walking on the roof of the royal palace in Babylon. The king exclaimed, "Is this not Babylon the Great that I have built to be a royal residence by my vast power and for my majestic glory?" While the words were still in the king's mouth, a voice came from King Nebuchadnezzar. "To you it is declared that the kingdom has departed from you. You will be driven away from people to live with wild animals, and you will feed on grass like cattle for 7 periods of time until you acknowledge that the Most High is ruler over human kingdoms, and he gives them to anyone he wants." At that moment, the message against Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled. He was driven away from people. He ate grass like cattle, and his body was drenched with dew from the sky, until his hair grew like eagle's feathers and his nails like bird's claws. But at the end of those days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, looked up to heaven, and my sanity returned to me. Then I praised the Most High and honored and glorified him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are counted as nothing, and he does what he wants with the army of heaven and the inhabitants of the earth. There is no one who can block his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" At that time my sanity returned to me, and my majesty and splendor returned to me for the glory of my kingdom. My advisors and my nobles sought me out. I was reestablished over my kingdom, and even more greatness came to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise, exalt, and glorify the King of the heavens, because all his works are true, and his ways are just. He is able to humble those who walk in pride. Chapter 5. King Belshazzar held a great feast for 1,000 of his nobles, and drank wine in their presence. Under the influence of the wine, Belshazzar gave orders to bring in the gold and silver vessels that his predecessor Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, so that the king and his nobles, wives, and concubines could drink from them. So they brought in the gold vessels that had been taken from the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his nobles, wives, and concubines drank from them. They drank the wine and praised their gods made of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. At that moment, the fingers of a man's hand appeared and began writing on the plaster of the king's palace wall next to the lampstand. As the king watched the hand that was writing, his face turned pale, and his thoughts so terrified him that he soiled himself, and his knees knocked together. The king shouted to bring in the mediums, Chaldeans, and diviners. I don't know how you say that. He said to these wise men of Babylon, "Whoever reads this inscription and gives me its interpretation will be clothed in purple, have a gold chain around his neck, and have the third highest position in the kingdom." So all the king's wise men came in, but none of them could read the inscription or make its interpretation known to him. Then King Belshazzar became even more terrified. His face turned pale, and his nobles were bewildered. Because of the outcry of the king and his nobles, the queen came to the banquet hall. "May the king live forever," she said. "Don't let your thoughts terrify you or face be pale. There is a man in your kingdom who has a spirit of the holy gods in him. In the days of your predecessor, he was found to have insight, intelligence, and wisdom like the wisdom of the gods. Your predecessor, King Nebuchadnezzar, appointed him chief of the magicians, Medians, Chaldeans, and diviners. Your own predecessor, the king, did this because Daniel, the one the king named Belshazzar, was found to have an extraordinary spirit, knowledge, and intelligence in the ability to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve problems. Therefore, summon Daniel, and he will give the interpretation. Then Daniel was brought before the king. The king said to him, Are you Daniel, one of the Judean exiles, that my predecessor, the king, brought from Judah? I've heard that you have a spirit of the gods in you, and that insight, intelligence, and extraordinary wisdom are found in you. Now, the wise men and mediums were brought before me to read this inscription and make its interpretation known to me, but they could not give its interpretation. However, I have heard about you that you can give interpretation and solve problems. Therefore, if you can read this inscription and give me its interpretation, you will be clothed in purple, have a gold chain around your neck, and have the third highest position in the kingdom. Then Daniel answered the king, You may keep your gifts and give your rewards to someone else. However, I will read the inscription for the king and make the interpretation known to him. Your majesty, the Most High God gave sovereignty, greatness, glory, and majesty to your predecessor, Nebuchadnezzar. Because of the greatness he gave to him, all peoples, nations, and languages were terrified and fearful of him. He killed anyone he wanted and kept alive anyone he wanted. He exalted anyone he wanted and humbled anyone he wanted. But when his heart was exalted and his spirit became arrogant, he was deposed from his royal throne, and his glory was taken from him. He was driven away from people. His mind was like an animal's. He lived with wild donkeys. He was fed grass like cattle, and his body was drenched with dew from the sky until he acknowledged that the Most High God is ruler over human kingdoms and sets anyone he wants over them. But you, his successor, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, even though you knew all this. Instead, you have exalted yourself against the Lord of the heavens. The vessels from his house were brought to you, and as you and your nobles, wives, and concubines drank wine from them, you praised the gods made of silver and gold, bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which do not see or hear or understand. But you have not glorified the God who holds your life breath in his hand and who controls the whole course of your life. Therefore, he sent the hand, and this writing was inscribed. This is the writing that was inscribed: Mene, Mene, Tekel, and Parsin. This is the interpretation of the message. Mene means that God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel means that you have been weighed on the balance and found deficient. Perez means that your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Then Belshazzar gave an order, and they clothed Daniel in purple, placed a gold chain around his neck, and issued a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. That very night, Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, was killed, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom at the age of 62. Chapter 6. Darius decided to appoint 120 satraps over the kingdom, stationed throughout the realm, and over them 3 administrators, including Daniel. These satraps would be accountable to them so that the king would not be defrauded. Daniel distinguished himself above the administrators and satraps because he had an extraordinary spirit, so the king planned to set him over the whole realm. The administrators and satraps, therefore, kept trying to find a charge against Daniel regarding the kingdom, but they could find no charge or corruption, for he was trustworthy, and no negligence or corruption was found in him. Then these men said, We will never find any charge against this Daniel unless we find something against him concerning the law of his God. So the administrators and satraps went together to the king and said to him, May King Darius live forever. All the administrators of the kingdom, the prefects, the satraps, advisors, and governors have agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an edict that for 30 days anyone who petitions any god or man except you, the king, will be thrown into the lion's den. Therefore, your majesty established the edict and signed the document so that as a law of the Medes and Persians, it is irrevocable and cannot be changed. So King Darius signed the written edict. When Daniel learned that the document had been signed, he went into his house. The windows in its upstairs room opened toward Jerusalem, And 3 times a day he got down on his knees, prayed, and gave thanks to God, just as he had done before. These men went as a group and found Daniel petitioning and imploring his God. So they approached the king and asked about his edict. Didn't you sign an edict that for 30 days any person who petitions any god or man except you, the king, will be thrown into the lion's den? The king answered, as a law of the Medes and Persians, the order stands and is irrevocable. Then they replied to the king, Daniel, one of the Judean exiles, has ignored you. The king and the edict you signed, for he prays 3 times a day. As soon as the king heard this, he was very displeased. He set his mind on rescuing Daniel and made every effort until sundown to deliver him. Then these men went together to the king and said to him, You know, your majesty, that it is law of the Medes and Persians that no edict or ordinance the king establishes can be changed. So the king gave the order and brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, May your God, whom you continually serve, rescue you. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den. The king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signet rings of his nobles, so that nothing in regard to Daniel could be changed. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and he could not sleep. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he reached the den, he cried out in anguish to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God. The king said, Has your God, whom you continually serve, been able to rescue you from the lions? Then Daniel spoke with the king, May the king live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they haven't harmed me, for I was found innocent before him. Also before you, your majesty, I have not done harm. The king was overjoyed and gave orders to take Daniel out of the den. When Daniel was brought up from the den, he was found to be unharmed, for he trusted in his God. The king then gave the command, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and thrown into the lion's den. They, their children, and their wives. They had not reached the bottom of the den before the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Then King Darius wrote to those of every people, nation, and language who live on the whole earth, May your prosperity abound. I issue a decree that in all my royal dominion people must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and endures forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his dominion has no end. He rescues and delivers. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth, for he has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Okay. So that's probably a story, at least the last story there, is probably one that most people are at least passively familiar with. I'm sure most people have at least heard about it. But, yeah, let's jump into our questions because it was a lot of reading. Question 1. What does Nebuchadnezzar's humbling reveal about the danger of pride and the necessity of submitting to God's authority? I think this shows, first of all, how dangerous pride can be. I think it gets overlooked a lot in the church and by Christians today. I don't think it's talked about nearly as much as it should be. But I do think it shows partially how dangerous pride can be. I also think another thing we can see here is that God's willing to knock you down a couple pegs if he needs to try to correct you and get you back to where he wants you to be. I've made a comment before, if you're going in with a mindset that if you're going in with a mindset that I can't pray, I can't read my Bible, I just don't have time to do that because of all these other things that I have that I'm doing. God's blessed me with all these things, and I need to make sure that I get them done. I don't have time to work on my relationship with God. God can take that away. He can take those things away because the most important thing is your relationship with God. I think that's that's kind of a little bit of what we see here. Now, not quite a relationship with God, with Nebuchadnezzar, but the idea that the pride was there because of what was in his life, and so God took that away to take the pride away. Question 2. How does the story of Belshazzar's feast highlight the reality of God's judgment on arrogance and sin? Yeah, we see that right from the get-go. Daniel tells him that he never did this right. He never came in and honored God. He never looked at God. They took these things that they had taken from Israel, drank wine out of them, and instantly started worshiping these other gods who were made of gold, and silver, and iron, and wood, and they can't hear, they can't see, they can't do anything. They're idols. And the judgment came because of that arrogance and that sin. Question 3. What can Daniel's courage and faithfulness in the lion's den teach us about trusting God in the face of opposition? Notice, and maybe we just didn't see this, but we don't see Daniel try to argue for himself. We don't see Daniel try to wiggle his way out of the situation. We see Daniel was told not to, or everyone was told not to pray to other gods. Daniel did it anyways. He continued to do it the same way, in the same manner it appears that he was doing previously. So he didn't change. He continued to do what he was supposed to do. And then he was thrown into the lion's den for that. And trusting God. And I think if there would have been an exchange like we saw with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego with Nebuchadnezzar, I think it would have been similar. I think we could have seen a situation where Daniel said, I know my God can deliver me, but even if he doesn't, I will still worship him. So, powerful message of faith and standing up in the midst of difficult situations. I think that's a lesson that everyone can learn to do better with and be better at.
Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, as all those things help the channel grow. If this has been a blessing to you, you can share it with somebody else. It can be a blessing to them, and word of mouth is the best way that podcasts grow as well. So that can be something that helps this channel as well. Come back every single day. We're going to have more content every single day. Bible reading plan. We're going through the Bible an entire year, different teachings, all kinds of just really great biblical sound stuff like that. So you're not going to want to miss it. Come back, subscribe. Thanks. God bless.